Welcome to the Ywam Kansas City podcast. We're here to activate our generation into missions and bring inspiration to live like Jesus in everyday life. And I'm excited to be joined by Rob Parker, the author of the book, Fully Funded Missionary, and a course. And today we're going to be talking about the topic, is it possible to be funded as a missionary? We're really excited to jump into this topic. Ywam internationally has exploded in growth with this type of model, actually of fundraising. And it's been amazing and caused things to grow and movement to happen, but also comes with its challenges as well. And so Rob has been an expert in these challenges. He's helped train thousands of missionaries in the prayer movement, mission movement, in how to be fully funded. And so Rob, we're really excited to jump in here today. Real quick, how long have you been doing this, helping people fundraise so they can be in the mission field?
Yeah, for me, I jumped into missions in 2006. I left a really great marketplace job in aerospace, started raising funds, didn't know how, just started doing the best I knew how. And once I wound up in missions, because I was funded, people asked questions, how did you do it? One thing led to another. I finished the school that I was in 2010, and then from 2010 till present, it's really been a full-time job. And we've helped numbers of organizations, number of houses of prayer, I've trained on a couple of different continents, and have seen just every demographic, age group, ethnicity be able to raise funds and walk out the call of God on their life. And so, it's been exciting. It's been hard, but really a number of wins for the kingdom.
Yeah, come on. Amen. Yeah. Well, I just want to say, even from the community of Ywam Kansas City, we've been really blessed by you. And being a missionary kid, if I'm just being totally honest, which hopefully I always am, I think finance is one of the biggest, obstacles for people to stay in missions that I've seen growing up. And so I have a little bit extra zip on this subject, knowing that this is such an important subject. Yeah. Sometimes it seems a little less spiritual, and sometimes it seems, is this even possible to actually be fully funded to do what God's called me to do? And so that's my first question as we kick off today. Rob, is this even possible to be fully funded as a missionary? Yeah.
Well, there's about 37 parts to the answer.
What's part one?
Well, the term fully funded missionary, it's kind of what does fully funded actually mean? Because are we talking about trying to fund that unbelievable 10-level dream of God? Or are we saying fully funded as in you have a reasonable salary for your stage of life and you can obey without unreasonable restriction? And so that's what I mean by fully funded, is we have the funds needed to do the job that God's called us to do, and we can obey the scriptures while we do it. And when I say obey the scriptures, what I mean is we want to be generous. We want to save. We don't want to be in debt. And so, the Proverbs in particular give us a number of verses. And I think it's important that missionaries do not take some kind of exemption from those scriptures. We want to obey them. And so when I say fully funded, I'm meaning a consistent salary that allows us to do the call of God, take care of our family the way the scripture would want us to, meet financial responsibilities, save some money, be generous, put some money away from the future. That's what I mean by fully funded. And so the other part of that is it even possible? And the shorter spiritual answer is yes, it's possible to do everything that God's called you to do.
Amen.
And so yes, it is possible. Now, I understand though that when people ask that question, they have a little bit of a hurdle, or they've got some emotions that starts raging around the issue of money. Then they start to do the math in their head, and they look at their contact base, and pretty soon it becomes overwhelming, and they go, no way. Or they've grown up in missions, and everybody they knew was in missions, and they've observed nobody making it financially for years. And so their experience starts to form their theology, and they just come to the conclusion it's not possible. But really, Jonathan, the root of the issue is Matthew 6, where Jesus is in the middle of Sermon on the Mount, and he's really explaining what it means to be a follower of Christ, and he's talking about the values of his kingdom. And he comes to the issue of worry, and he says that you're worried about food and clothing and where you're going to stay and so forth. And he says the reason you're worried is because of mammon, and you've allowed mammon to creep in and be your master. And he makes it very clear. You cannot serve two. Now, Jonathan, he's not talking about greed. He's not talking about indulgence. He's not talking about bigger and better. When he's referring to mammon, he's actually talking about, where do you put your trust? Is your security in your savings account in the stock market, or truly is your security in me? Are you following the Holy Spirit, or are you following the job offers? Okay, now sometimes they're the same thing.
Sure, they can, they can overlap sometimes.
Yeah, and so what happens is when Jesus is addressing it in Matthew 6, he's basically saying there's going to be times that you choose financial predictability, security over my voice. Or there's going to be times in your own struggle that I'm asking you to be generous, and the human heart panics at, I'm struggling, what does it mean to give up more money? And those are the touch points he's talking about, where you're going to love one and you're going to hate the other. You're going to obey the one, you're going to despise the other. And human beings on the planet are pushed around by mammon far more than they realize. We make decisions about where we're going to live, what jobs we take, whether we move away or not, whether we go on vacation or not, what kind of car we buy, if I decide to work overtime, if my wife decides to work. Mammon has such an influence on our life. And so often what happens in the area of missions is someone will step in, and let's say they've got a really clean slate and they have really no missional background or no expectation. Okay, how am I going to make it? And they start looking at their job of serving, in remote Africa, and they're like, how am I going to support myself? It never occurs to them that they could raise funds. And they start trying to find a part-time job in Africa to fund themselves while they're there. They can't make it work. And then that thought process starts turning into, I must have misunderstood the Lord. Maybe the timing's not right. When really, if we had an understanding about what God intended for partnership and what he intended for missionaries to do in the area of funding, then we find out there's all kinds of doors open to us. And so, can a missionary raise support? Yeah. But probably not with the current understanding, and probably not with the current level of training. Quite a bit of our thinking has to be renewed to see a way forward, and then to get properly trained. But we have everything we need, everything at our disposal to obey. See, Jesus is a righteous judge. And we're going to stand before him at judgment seat, where he evaluates our life and he rewards us for work well done. And his righteousness will not allow him to reward us or to withhold reward unless that obedience was knowable and doable. And so he could make a calling to Africa or Eastern Europe clear to you, but then it not be possible to do, and then withhold reward for not doing it. No, his righteousness will not allow that. And so we have all that we need to obey. Now, we might need to pick up the training. We might need to learn a language. We might need to go through cross-cultural training, immerse ourselves in a culture. We might need to make contacts outside of our immediate spiritual family in order to raise funds. We might need to get properly trained, read a few books, talk to a few people with years of experience. And so the answer is yes, we can be fully funded, but we may need to learn a few things. We may need to step out of our comfort zone, but the way forward is there and it can be done.
Amen. That's good. I love that. And you're already jumping in a little bit to my next question I wanted to ask. So first off, you're saying, yes, it is possible. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
And what would you say you have a lot of experience training people. I'm saying thousands. I'm not even fully aware, but I know you've done trainings all over the place in the missions and prayer movement. What would you say are the top obstacles that prevent people from being successful in being fully funded?
Yeah. Well, it really falls into two camps. Those who are unsuccessful because they never start.
They never pull the trigger. They never go.
Yeah, they never go for it. Okay. Then there's the group that tries some version of partnership development, but they're not successful. And so for those that never start, the things that I see primarily are philosophical, meaning they think things like ministry's not a real job, and so I shouldn't be paid to do it, or they associate missions with poverty. Sometimes it's a self-worth issue, like there's other ministries that are more important
Interesting.
than what I'm doing. And so a lot of the philosophical, internal, kind of emotional things, even some of the philosophical things can be, they've read some really great books about saints in the past, and there's these miraculous stories about provision, and everybody wants a spiritual experience, and everybody wants, to be people of faith. And so they think, if I'm really going to love God, if I'm really going to trust God, then my life needs to look like that life.
Exactly like that.
And I found out a lot of those stories are exaggerated. But even when they're not, you're talking about the rare exception. And what's so interesting too is we have a lot of stories that shape our understanding about how a missionary is supposed to be funded, but that's not how our local pastors are funded. They're workers too. And so without even knowing it, we play a part in creating a double standard. Is there's one way missionaries are funded, then there's another way that other workers are funded. And so also this model of this really what we would call supernatural provision, which, by the way, Jonathan, all the gold and silver in the earth belongs to the Lord. All the money you and I have in our pocket belongs to the Lord. So everything that we do with money is already a very spiritual thing, and all provision is actually supernatural. But I understand what people mean when they say supernatural. They're really talking about the equivalent of manna.
Yeah.
It just,
checks falling from heaven.
Yeah. Suddenly found my mailbox. And I don't even know who this person is.
Right.
And those things do happen. They're real.
Yeah.
But when there's an expectation that that's the norm and the pattern, it can lead to considerable disillusionment. And that approach often labels the worker as not having enough faith when it doesn't work out the way that they thought. And then that causes all kinds of heartache that's not necessary. And so the other big, so what stands in the way? Well, if you could be in that philosophical camp, just ideas and emotions. The other part of it, the other side of the camp is, all right, I'm going to go for it. And they launch out and they do something. They have a very limited success. Maybe it didn't go well. Maybe it was embarrassing to them, maybe even traumatic, and they just give up. Okay. Almost everyone I've met has some measure of success. Everybody has 8 or 10 or 12 people around them that believe in them and are willing to partner with them to some degree. But the biggest obstacle on that side of it, I would say, is proper training. Our most natural instincts that we carry in the area of fundraising actually aren't helpful. They're not really the biblical mindset. and they're not really dealing with why we, as the stewards of God, how and why we make decisions about financial commitments. And then we tend to borrow ideas from the secular world and fundraisers and telethons and bake sales, and some of that has some effect, but it doesn't equal real partnership that's lasting. And so philosophical and a lack of good training.
That's good.
The third thing's kind of a minor point to the training is time. It's hard to stop ministry that's really urgent and needed, and people are depending on you to push pause on that and step away for a couple of months and fund the ministry. And so, the answer is it can be philosophical, it can be training, it can be the issue of time.
That's so good. So what I hear you saying, especially in that, that's super good. I'm glad you shared that. On the philosophical side, it's internal things, belief systems, thoughts they have about it that would even keep them from moving forward at all or in a limited way. And then that second thing you're talking about is training and time to even do the training. And I know, and maybe you can just jump on this real quick before we wrap up part 1 here. You have an amazing course, an online course with training. And I'll just say for me personally, I've studied a few different courses, and there's a lot of good ones out there and good books I've read on this. And your course was, in terms of you break down obviously the biblical foundation there. So that's where you start. You also help remove barriers that would keep us from doing it, and then you get into, hey, here's how you honor people in the process. Love it. It's an amazing course, and I want to talk more on some of that stuff in part 2 here. But real quick, where could people find that course? And what would you say for them to do it successfully? What do they need to do to actually do the course fully?
Well, they can find the course at fullyfundedmissionary.com. And it's just an online training course like many we've seen before. It's done in a really user-friendly format. But they can go to fullyfundedmissionary.com. They're going to see 2 trainings there, a stage 1 and a stage 2. Stage 1 is about 11 and a half hours worth of content, about 20 hours worth of homework. So it's about a 35 to 40 hour course total to get through it. Walks you through it systematically. And then stage 2 is really like, okay, now that we know how, let's lay out a specific strategy for you, help you approach your contact base and so forth. And so there's a training manual that we recommend accompanies that online training. So you can open up your notes, watch the video, follow the instructions, and do your homework. Your homework actually helps build some resources that you're going to use, tools that you're going to use in the partnership development process.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that with us, Rob.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, I'm excited to jump into more discussion here. For those who were tuning in, thanks so much for tuning in. We want you guys to take this content, share it with your friends, and especially if you know a missionary out there, send this to them. Share this with them. I think they'll be encouraged by it. And part 2 coming soon.
Thanks for tuning in to our Ywam Kansas City podcast. If you enjoyed listening, please subscribe, share, and leave a rating. If you are watching, please like, comment, share, and subscribe, and be sure to turn on our post notifications to catch our podcasts as soon as they're released. We'll see you next time.